I work with photography mainly because that's what I feel like I'm good at. I think when you want to have something that you want to express, sure, there's different mediums that work better for different ways of expressing yourself, but I've always found that for what I want to say in my work, photography has always kind of done the job and speaks really clearly to me. So because I do landscape, for example, I could paint those landscapes, but I don't have necessarily my own interpretation, which that's something you can express in a painting. I don't have that. I just actually purely and simply want to document a part of nature, for example. So yeah, for that reason, photography works really well for me. No, that's actually interesting, and I was thinking about that just the other day. And I believe in fate a lot of the times. Like, I believe that things happen for a particular reason. So I was in Paris and I started photography school there, and it was a digitally taught course. But I just got introduced through my other friends who were doing analog on this side. They introduced it to me, and it was just something about it that really appealed to me. And in Paris, it's quite accessible to use analog. Like, there's good places where you can have them developed and printed for you. So I think maybe if I were somewhere else, it wouldn't have been as accessible, and therefore I wouldn't have continued with it. But it was really an encouraging place to use analog. And once I started with that, I realized the level of focus that you have to use in an analog rather than a digital, for me, was really stimulating. The fact that you saw a subject and you had to take your time, and you would take one shot, and that shot would, at the same time, it would end up on your negative, but it would also be a mental image almost for the rest of your life, I could say. And that's not the connection I've had with digital. You have to be careful, you can't make mistakes, and I really like that it's a bit more challenging. Well, initially that came because we had our teachers wanted us to produce paintings, drawings, and because that's not something that I'm very attracted to creating, I had to find an alternative, and it became clear to me that dioramas, my teacher introduced them to me, the concept of them, and then I had to investigate and explore what it was. And I felt like that was something that was very doable for me, especially because I could incorporate my own images, and it was a lot of cutting and pasting type things that I think, anyone can cut and paste things. And it was interesting. I really enjoyed doing it, and it literally just came out of, I was pushed towards that direction. And when you do, you just have to make a decision, and in that decision I managed to find something that actually worked really well for me. And in doing acetone transfers as well from photographic images is another way of incorporating photography in it. So and I love wood, like the smell of wood, the way it feels, the way it looks. So diorama was just a perfect way for me to express my drawing. So dioramas for me is kind of it's a two-part process. It's two separate artworks actually in the end. So it starts off by choosing your material, and I work with pine, and I create a size of a box that I'm comfortable with, and I leave the top open so that I allow a lot of light to come in, and also the option of having things actually hanging in the air. And as well, I find that if you can seal something to the shape of a square, like a complete box, by covering the top of, I think that has a lot of connotations that suggests limitation and things like that. So I think you have to be also very mindful of that it is a box, and how do you try to make it not so much like a box, you know, to actually keep the imagination going. So once I've done that, I've used acetone transfers to create a sort of like an abstract landscape on the walls and on the bottom bit. And then I've created a few layers as well, just to have some sort of a depth. Then I incorporate objects, and that could be either in the form of photographs where I cut out particular shapes, or actual toy objects that I paint in black paint. So these objects are placed inside the box on these different levels. And at the moment, on the current box that I've made, I've also have a series of people sitting on park benches. And I've put them all, overlaps them kind of, so I've put them together as an audience, and I've stuck that to the very front of the box, so that suggests, well, that is, the audience is us humans, kind of viewing the objects that have no particular order or shape or meaning, so it just kind of suggests that we all have our own way of viewing the world. So that's why it's titled The Way I See It. Yeah, and afterwards, so that's the one part, that's the actual diorama side of it. And afterwards, I like to take close-ups of particular parts of the diorama that I afterward will print. So I do that digitally because for technical reasons, and I print them. So those are photographs in themselves, and then there's the diorama on its own as well. Yeah, I guess if I could meet anyone, I would want to meet the French documentary photojournalism photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson. But like I was thinking, I'm a little bit skeptical because I'm not so sure that he would really enjoy having a conversation with me, because he's French and has a bit of a grumpy character. But say the scenario that he would just, I don't know, relax, and I would have access to all his images, that would just be amazing. Because when he was doing what he was doing, he was one of the few people who were, I don't know, so contemporary and so engaging in his way of taking photographs. And in terms of composition, because I'm very, very fond of good composition. Sorry. So for that reason, he is amazing. I've seen a couple of his documentaries where he's in a very uncomfortable position and a very fast-pacing environment, and he still manages to capture these moments that you would think that he'd have to set up a tripod and take his time, and he does that in a second. He just has that like a sixth sense, you know. I feel like he's the type of person that he can sense from the back of his neck that there's an image to be taken, and he just turns around and he gets it, and it's perfect. So just to be able to see, you know, something more personal from him, and maybe a clue as what made him so successful, that would just be